welcome to the D3D4 Football Podcast with me, your host, James Richards. Hello everyone, welcome back to the second D3D4 podcast of the new campaign. This one is our League One preview podcast where we go 24 to 1st, predicting where we think each team in League One will finish. Thank you for everyone who gave comment and downloaded and listened to our League Two preview podcast. That's still available on our feed on Spotify and iTunes if you haven't yet listened to it. Thank you to everyone who's engaged in our Patreon campaign. Really helpful if people can support this podcast and what we're doing with the website for as little as 80p a month. Really appreciate everyone who's jumped on board with that. I'm joined for this podcast by Chris Stringer. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm good, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. We took a little bit of time debating about this list that we're about to give people. Not quite as straightforward as we thought.
No, there's a few that it's. I mean, we saw in League One last season. It's so difficult to predict this league. There's some real powerhouses, but the bottom half, especially, I thought was really difficult to predict.
Yeah, last season's relegation battle was ridiculous.
Legendary.
Legendary, yeah. 13 teams battling it out until sort of the penultimate weekend, really. So, without further ado, let's jump in to our 2019-20 League One predictions. League One. And it seems really silly, to be honest, because there's two teams that we obviously have got at the bottom. It doesn't really make much difference which order they're in, but starting at 24th, we have Bolton. Currently one player on the books there. Whether or not they'll start the league is still debatable. The whole situation with the clubs like Bolton, like Bury, we're seeing it at Macclesfield. We've seen late payments at other clubs across the summer. It's not acceptable. Something needs to happen to change this. We're advocates of the lower leagues, and one of the big things that we get frustrated about is the disproportionate amount of wealth that doesn't come down this far, and it's not right. People say, why should rich clubs support poor clubs? It's not as simple as that. Unfortunately, if you're a rich club in the Premier League being paid hundreds of £1 million per season to have your TV rights, your foreign broadcasting rights, and then you pay your players upwards of 300,000 a week, that wage inflation is ruining football really far down the ladder. So, rich clubs may complain that they don't have to support poor clubs, but if they're going to change the fundamental financial landscape of football, then there needs to be some sort of support network to allow our professional leagues to continue in the vein that has made them so famous. And the EFL, I mean, if you're saying they're fit for purpose, I'm not convinced at all.
They'd have failed their fit and proper test.
There's questions whether that was even conducted.
It wasn't at Bury, was it? It was they've allowed Dale to take over quite in a quite quick process where the full due diligence wasn't done. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure how the EFL can claim to be some sort of governing body that's looking out for the interests of fans when it's allowing potentially dangerous owners. And all right, you can have the debate: is Dale the problem? Was it day before? You can't let someone buy a football club with so few checks, especially when you're making every other club go through these checks. Oldham had to wait 6 months for their owner to take over while they were doing the checks, whereas they've let Dale take over in a matter of weeks.
Yeah, and it's left the club in an awful situation where they, if this opening fixture gets cancelled, I mean, what is the prospects of them completing the season? I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, they've already got 12-point deductions, these sides. I mean, it's ruining the competition as well as the community clubs that are taking part in this. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and we mentioned so many times that football clubs, even if they're only getting small attendances within their region, are cornerstones of the local community, especially in the lower leagues, especially clubs like Bury and Bolton. They're the clubs that people have been going to for decades, that form part of your routine. You can't just let these clubs rot away.
No, well, let's hope something gets sorted. But rather pointless picks, to be honest. But Bolton bottom, Bury second bottom. Let's get into the proper predictions of clubs that are actually able to field squads of players. And in 22nd, Chris, who do we have in 22nd?
Well, we've gone for Wycombe Wanderers, largely, I think, because when you look at the performances towards the back end of last season, it simply wasn't good enough. There's been talk that apparently their budget's been cut because of I think they've got new people in the boardroom now.
Koenig has come in, hasn't he? The guy who was meant to take over at Yeovil. But whether that investment, I mean, the difference this season, like we said on our previous pod, is that you've got until September, so they could strengthen quite heavily potentially.
They could do, but there doesn't appear to be the money there for them to make the strong signings that I think they need to make. I think they'll continue in the same vein that they did last season, and I can't see really where they're going to get a lot of goals from.
No, I like Paul Smith. I think he's a very tricky player, obviously on loan at Accrington last season. I think he created more chances per 90 minutes than any other Accrington player during that campaign, so he's one to watch out for. Jack Grimmer obviously is a very good defender coming in from Coventry. I mean, I think, you look at it and you think they're older players that they have and rely on are now another year older. Whether Gareth Ainsworth or not can pull out the hat, another miracle. I mean, we write Wycombe off at our peril. I think we might be looking at this one at the end of the season and thinking it was a bit silly. But
what we saw last season was that they were so determined to grind out results even when the odds were against them. There was that performance against Barnsley which sort of sticks in memory.
Yeah, they were excellent. I mean, they were excellent, to be honest, and they had a great start, which kind of saved them when the rot set in near the end of the season. It's just whether or not there's going to be enough strength in depth there to do a 46-game season. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not convinced, and that is why we have them in 22nd. In 21st, we have another side that have had problems this summer paying players, reportedly anyway, and that is Southend United, a team that created the least chances per 90 minutes than any side in the division last season. They stayed up thanks to a dramatic final day victory over Sunderland. But at this moment in time, I have not been blown away at all by the recruitment. In fact, the recruitment has been hugely understated. Brandon Goodship coming in from Weymouth, Mark Milligan from Hibs, Nathan Rolfe from Dundee. Decent players. But, Chris, nothing in there that says this is going to improve that squad that was at times really struggling last season.
Yeah, and this is sort of what I was thinking. Southend struggled for a lot of last season. Was it the last game of the season or second to last game of the season that they managed to secure their safety? The squad isn't better, and I think the things going on in the background with late wage payments, I know that was sort of creeping in last season, but they've had a summer of it now. They're entirely unsettled. I think they're really going to struggle.
Yes, I think they will. They may bring in a couple of players. I think the connections that Kevin Bond might have could be interesting as the window gets a bit later, and he'll bring in some loans. That's what I expect to see from them. But at this moment in time, I'm not convinced. They obviously rely so heavily on Simon Cox going forward that can he continue to score the goals and be their most creative player at the same time? I'm not sure. I'd like to see Sam Hart come back there. I thought he was quite good last season. They have so far rebuffed offers for Drew Yearwood, so that's impressive. But whether or not, again, they've got anything in that squad that suggests they're good enough to stay in this division, I'm not convinced as of yet, and that is why we have them going down. In 20th, Chris, who do we have in 20th?
Well, just scraping away from relegation. Is AFC Wimbledon. They sort of impressed me at times last season, but again, they're another squad that I think is lacking in real quality. Especially if rumours are to be believed and Piggott heads off to Sheffield Wednesday, I think they're going to struggle in attack. Their defence looks a little bit limited for my liking, but they do have a decent midfield, and I think that could be the turning factor in keeping them up.
I also think that the coach, Wally Downs, is got a siege mentality there. So they do have something going for them. They've got good character. But yeah, if Piggott goes, there's a big concern for me. I know Adam Roscoe, we'll see how he does coming in for his... I
love where they've signed him from. Cardiff Metropolitan Uni.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see. They've also signed a guy from Met Police, Nesta Guinness-Walker. That'll be interesting. Nathan Trott obviously coming in on loan from West Ham. Luke O'Neill's a fine player, good right back. Yeah. I think he'll do very well. Michael Falevi, I think he looks a live wire striker, someone that they could get a few goals from. Maybe he could be a decent foil for someone else, but they don't have the goals in that team.
There's a lot of risk here. With these signings, there's a lot of risk. Yeah,
there's nothing that stands out, is there? And obviously, Toby Seebeck, is gone, and he was an impressive figure last season. And Deshi Ojelaja obviously now at Charlton. So they've lost some good defensive players. And I'm just wondering, this is going to be the season possibly where they drop. I mean, we've got them just staying up, but it's going to be a close run thing. I do not see Wimbledon, I'm afraid, staying clear of trouble this year. And, a tight budget that they run on, they're going to have to use all their know-how and resources to stay clear of relegation. As are the team we've got finishing in 19th, Chris.
Yes, my favourite club, Rochdale. They looked vulnerable defensively when I saw them the other week. They were playing Oldham in a pre-season friendly, and granted we did as well, but they looked pinned back by a modest League Two attack. And I think when they come up against some of the better strikers in League One, they're going to really struggle. I think they have got a decent manager in Barry Murphy, but there's nothing that's standing out for them in terms of signings. They struggled last season as well. They've been struggling for a couple of seasons, and I think they'll
so heavily, don't they, on Henderson?
So heavily, and if he picks up an injury or something, they are really struggling for goals. And I think, like Wimbledon, they might just have enough to stay up, but it's going to be a testing season for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think it will be a testing season. I think obviously the move away from Keith Hill, we'll see how that works out long term, because I think he was a manager who probably deserved a bit more time. They've obviously vastly split the fan base regarding whether he should stay or not. Robert Sanchez signed in goal. If anyone saw his performances for Forest Green last season, you might want to go back on YouTube and have a look at some of the clangers that he produced, especially the one at Exeter. But there's so many to choose from, so don't let me spoil your fun. There's loads. This guy, I'm not convinced at all as a goalkeeper. Maybe he's young, maybe he'll improve, but some of them, these concentration levels were appalling. Ergun O'Connell's a good signing.
I'm still not convinced by him. Having seen his performances at Oldham not too long ago, he has a lot of mistakes in him, and I think he's done well at Bury under the guidance of an excellent manager and a squad playing with confidence. And should that be turned on its head and he's playing in a side that's struggling, I'm not sure he'll be the best asset.
I think we're just going to have to watch carefully with Rochdale. I mean, they have some good young players still in there, but against a heavy reliance on Henderson, a defence that looks a little bit vulnerable, and obviously a small budget. They always have to try and pull a rabbit out of the hat to stay up, and I think they probably will just about do it. I mean, having Bolton and Bury in this division this season is kind of reducing the chances of sides getting relegated. So that's sort of a blessing in disguise for Rochdale, but I think they'll have a struggling season. In 18th, Chris, who have we got in 18th?
Accrington Stanley. They're a team I really like for the way that they're run, and so many say the same things when you look at Andy Holt on Twitter. He's very transparent about the way he runs the club, and he runs it in a very sustainable manner, because let's face it, a club of Accrington Stanley's side was doing well to be in the Football League at all. To make them, a pretty secure League One side is really impressive. I like what their manager does, Coleman. I think he's good, he's well grounded, he knows how to run a club, and he knows how to manage expectation well, I think. I've been impressed with a couple of the signings they've brought in. Zane Francis Angle from Fylde, he's coming highly rated, and I believe I've seen him play for Fylde, and if he's the player I'm thinking of, he looked good for them. Joe Maguire I like, and Kaba Sherif is supposed to be very good.
Yeah, I think as well the fact that they get good young players, they're trusted as a club to get good young players in, develop them, make them better. John Coleman has a great record of doing that. He also has a pretty decent spine of that team that has remained sort of there with the likes of Sean McConville, Billy Key, Clark in there as well.
Of course, there's questions over Billy Key, though, because he's been absent from pre-season training, I believe, with mental health issues. So I do wish him the best, but that could really cost Accrington.
Yeah, I mean, we do, of course, wish him the best. He's a really good bloke, and let's hope he comes back and thrives again. I think it's a very difficult issue dealing with mental health. Kevin Ellison so eloquently has come out and spoken about it. So let's hope he gets better. Also, I'm a bit concerned about Accrington's defence, but we'll see how they do. But I think 18th is a pretty solid prediction for them. In 17th, we have Tranmere, newly promoted after back-to-back promotions. It's going to be an interesting season for them, see how they get on in the third tier. Obviously lost their key marksman in James Norwood from last season, so they're going to have to try very hard to find the goals from elsewhere. I think he was, they relied on him quite heavily. They do have a decent squad. I think some of the players, like Connor Jennings, people like that, who will offer them a fair amount going forward. And the fact that they've kept, some of their key squad members from last season is absolutely massive, to be honest.
Yeah.
But Kieran Morris coming in, he's a good signing. Sid Nelson, who was very impressive at the back.
Stefan Payne could be, if he can find the form that he had at Shrewsbury a couple of seasons ago, that could be a really big signing for them, I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think not at all liked in Bristol.
But did he score 2 goals in 20 games or something for them?
Yeah, there was a lot of question marks over his attitude, whether he even wanted to be there. But I think, he can do it, and we know he can do it because he did very well for Shrewsbury. So if he can find that form, I don't think he'll get anywhere near the Norwood strike rate, but he can certainly bring others into play. Darren Potter looks really technically gifted player. Hopefully he'll have a season where fitness is not an issue, signed in from Rotherham. And obviously they have stability in their dugout, which Mickey Mellon has done a superb job to bring this club back from where they were. I think, although I don't see them ripping up the division or having any particular flirtations with the playoffs, I think 17th they'll be a fairly solid side that shouldn't have too many relegation issues. So that is why I think great. I think slowly building. I think that's what they'll do. I think Tranmere will slowly build, and we'll see them probably settle themselves back as a regular League One side over the coming seasons, which
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, considering where they were just a couple of seasons ago, it's a big achievement, and I'm sure the fans are absolutely delighted with what they've achieved under Mickey Mellon. In 16th, I'll field this one because it's Oxford United, and I think a lot will depend on who we bring in, where we finish. But at the moment, the squad is woefully inadequate. Good midfield, don't get me wrong. We've got some great players in midfield. Tarek Foster, of course, a big signing. Alex Gorin, meant to be highly rated, coming in from Motherwell, paid a fee for him. Chris Cannon, unknown from Columbus Crew after his move from Motherwell to the MLS went through, and we've brought him back to play for us this season, or at least certainly until January.
A bit of a Scottish heavy squad you've got this season.
Well, there's a couple of players in there from Scotland, yeah. I mean, the big problem we have is Curtis Nelson has left and we have yet to replace him. And although Rob Dickey's stats are excellent, he is a centre-back who relies on having a strong partner with him to be effective. We've seen it in pre-season. We've looked very vulnerable defensively in pre-season. I think in attack we don't literally have any attackers apart from Jamie Mackie. So this is the same thing. I mean, Oxford fans will be really frustrated because we knew going into this summer how much we lacked a striker last season. The strike force was weak. It cost us very badly early on in the campaign last season, and yet we're virtually at the start of the new campaign with exactly the same problem. So
I do think you've done very well to get Tarek Foster in.
Well, I think so. I mean, he is a bit of an enigma. He's a player that can sometimes disappear in games. I like him, though. I think he's a good signing. Obviously, he played under Robinson at Charlton, so that is perhaps why we've brought him in. I just not convinced, and I am worried that, of course, if we have a poor start and we don't bring in the players we need, we could flirt very dangerously with relegation. On the other hand, of course, if we bring in a couple of strikers to add to our squad, you never know. We could be a lot higher. But at the moment, based on what we've got in the team, I think Oxford United being 16th would be sort of a realistic outlook on where we'll finish. In 15th, Chris, who have we got in 15th?
Gillingham. They've had a lot of change, I think. I've seen some people suggesting they might finish a little bit higher than this. But I think that they've obviously lost Eves to Hull. They'll be a little bit unsettled, and at times they struggled last season. And without Eves' goals, I think that could be a little bit more difficult for them. And I think Steve Evans can.
Evans.
You can't talk about Gillingham without mentioning him, and I've made my opinions on quite clear in other podcasts. But I think if the squad's already a little bit unsettled, they're lacking a goal scorer. I'm not sure he's the man that's going to get them right up there?
He's a divisive figure. Gillingham fans were, I wouldn't say evenly split, because I think there was more negativity about his appointment. I saw the positivity, but obviously they're going to give him a chance and they're going to see what he can do. I think it will take time because he signed, nigh on, as you expect with him, 10 players or more. Probably more than that, in fact. Probably closer to 12 players have come in. Lots of change, lots of transition. A lot of time is also always required when you have such a massive turnover of squad. I know the cliche of gelling is used to try and sort of placate fans when things don't start well, but actually I think you do need to bed your players into a settled playing style, identity and formation, and as of yet, it will probably not be apparent what he's going to bring. Obviously, Alex Jacoby, great signing from Watford, was quite useful in spells for Bristol Rovers last season. Mark Marshall, interested to see how he copes after not playing very much football at all for the last 18 months. So, but he's a good pickup. Mikael Mandron will work his socks off for you. Don't see him replacing Eves Goals though, and I think that's the one reason we're a little bit sceptical about where they'll finish. Lee Hodson looks an excellent pickup from Rangers, a really good right back. My favourite player, anyone who's listened to our pre-season pods will know that Jack Bonham, I think, is an excellent signing. Cisse and Willock will be a good pairing in midfield. Willock, I don't think has had that much football though in the pre-season because he's been nursing an injury. So, I think it's a good lot of recruitment, but I'm not sold on Steve Evans, and I'm just a bit concerned where Gillingham will find the goals from. But again, let's be honest, with the players they've got there, they shouldn't be anywhere near relegation, and perhaps a little bit more optimism is needed from everyone. I mean, us included, and they might push a little bit further up the table. But I think it'd be a solid campaign from the Gills, and probably one of their better campaigns in recent seasons. Right, let's move on to 14th. Chris, who do we have in 14th?
Well, this is the slightly contentious one for us, wasn't it? We've gone with Bristol Rovers. We put them down as 14th. I went away, started doing a little bit of extra reading on them, and I messaged you, James, and said, I think these might struggle. Looks, maybe 18th and 19th. And then about 5 minutes later, he sent me a message saying that Adebayo signed. And
big signing.
Yeah, big signing, and suddenly our concerns, which were largely around the attack, had pretty much gone. Because I'd initially said last season they were very reliant on Johnson Clark-Harris. And don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of Johnson Clark-Harris. I think he's a very good striker, very, very strong, and that tends to ruffle defences. But it's dangerous to rely on him, and they've quelled that with this signing, I think.
Yeah, they've got some interesting pickups actually in their pre-season recruitment. I like you, was a little bit sceptical about where they were going to score their goals because Nichols hasn't scored many. Riley, I mean, he might improve this season because he's had a season in the EFL, so looking forward to seeing how he gets on in the second campaign. But I think Victor Adebayo is such a good signing. I mean, I saw him play for Barnsley last season, and he could have been a starter at most teams in League One, but the fact that he was in a side that had people like Wally Woodrow, Kiefer Moore, or Kiefer Moore, sorry, and he had no place to wiggle into that side. They had such good attacking options, but the Bristol Rovers team put out the video of his performances in the reserves. I mean, he scores goals with ease. He's a strong, powerful runner, and more importantly than anything, this gives Graham Coughlin some options. It means he doesn't have to rely on Clark-Harris. It means he can change his formation up. We have those two up front together if he wants, and that will be good. I mean, if you've got Luke Leahy coming on their left-hand side, and he provides almost, I think it was almost the highest number of crosses of any player. He creates chances. I mean, Walsall fans weren't that keen on him because defensively he's not good at all, and that side of his game will need to be worked on. But he will offer some excellent service to the players like Clark-Harris, like Adebayo. Yeah. So I really am looking forward to seeing how they do. Obviously, Tom Davies is a good signing, as is Mark Little. So they've got some decent players in that team. Again, I mean, it'd be a big ask for them to go any higher, I think, than 14th and really challenge the playoffs, given the strength of some of the teams above them. But with that signing and with those players they've now got and with the options they've brought in for themselves, I can't see Bristol Rovers struggling, and it should be a fairly safe season of mid-table obscurity for them. In 13th, we have Shrewsbury. Now, this is a side that has generally split opinion across all these sort of predictions that people have been putting out over social media and Twitter. But I actually kind of like Shrewsbury. I think they'll have a better campaign than they did last season, yet to be convinced that they're going to score enough goals to challenge for the playoffs. And I'm not necessarily convinced that the fans believe that they'll do that either. But it'll be a good campaign. They've got some good ball players. They've signed some strong defenders. I mean, Aaron Pierre, his second spell in League One, this will be after sort of struggling with Northampton. I think he'll do a lot better with Sam Ricketts as his coach. Yeah, I think so. Ebanks Landell, not the most mobile, but a huge mountain of a man who should offer them a lot more security, especially the fact they conceded so many goals from set pieces last season. That should solve that problem. Steve Morris is a leader. Whether Steve Morrison will score the goals, though, I don't know. I mean, obviously, brilliant player for Millwall, and in his previous roles at Stevenage, Norwich, for example. Ryan Giles, I like him. I think he's a good, interesting player coming in from Wolves. And, dare I say it, they've probably, in Max O'Leary, got a goalkeeper they can finally rely on, because last season there were some real issues with the goalkeeping. So
you've jinxed it now, James.
Well, let's hope not. But I mean, they do. I mean, Max O'Leary was excellent for Bristol City in the games that he managed to play, and they've got Joe Murphy as a backup who is very experienced. Luke McCormack as well. I mean, Luke McCormack, sorry, he's a good technical midfielder, and it'll be interesting to see how he does in his first campaign in the EFL. Obviously, this will make or break him, and I think it could make him. I think he'll be used sensibly by Ricketts, and I think Ricketts will get them playing in a certain way with a certain playing identity. I don't know what you think, Chris. I mean, goals is the one thing that we're just struggling to see in pre-season. They've really not been prolific at all.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think they had, obviously 2 seasons ago, that outrageous campaign where they were very close to promotion. And then they've had the polar opposite last season when there was real fears that they might get relegated. I think they've, as you've touched on, they've secured the areas that were most vulnerable for them last season, which was defensively, which probably takes into the regions of the mid-table. And the only reason I can't see them going higher is a lack of goals.
Which may well be addressed before the start of the campaign. But to be honest, I mean, they're such a well-run club.
They're so well-run. It's another club I really admire for the way that they've invested sustainably, and they've looked at the infrastructure of the club so they can have a firm ground to build on.
Yeah, they don't go tracing pipe dreams, Shrewsbury. They build a sustainable community club. I mean, the fact they've got safe standing in there, they've got fan zone, they really engage with their fan base, and it's great to see. And I'd love to see them do very well. But I think 13th at the moment is where we have them, and I'm pretty confident that they'll be there or thereabouts come the end of the season. In 12th, Chris, who we got in 12th?
MK Dons. They're another squad that I liked last season. Obviously won promotion. I like their manager Tisdale, and I think they've done okay on recruitments. They've got a decent squad. They've obviously kept a fair bit of that promotion winning team, and I think they've got enough to stay up and have a pretty successful season, but mostly consolidation. The big loss for them obviously is Chukwuemeka. But I think Joe Mason is a solid replacement for him.
If Joe Mason performs, that's the thing with Joe, isn't it? I mean, he showed such a lot of promise and then had a woeful spell at Portsmouth, lost a lot of confidence. But Paul Tisdale is a wonderful coach, very positive, and if he can get Joe Mason believing in himself again, there's a really good player in there. And I think there's a lot of negative comments about how he performed at certain teams when it was announced on social media. But I would ignore all that. I'd wait and see how Paul Tisdale uses him and what he expects to bring him, to get from in this squad, within this formation, within the campaign ahead. Because Joe Mason could be a good pickup. Brandon Dickinson, excellent signing. Hiram Boateng obviously knows his boss from Exeter. Very technically gifted. I think he's still fairly young, so he's got a lot of growth potential there. Reece Healy is a big signing as well, because he was superb for them in the League Two, and they really missed him when he went back. Regan Poole will give them some options in defence that at times looked a bit slow and lethargic, and obviously you just hope they have a campaign without the injury problems that sort of scuppered them near the end. I mean, obviously they did manage to do brilliantly and get automatic promotion, but I think it would have been far more comfortable for Paul Tisdale in his side if they hadn't had the injury issues. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they do. I really like Paul Tisdale, and I think MK will have a very good season, perhaps do a little better than we've put them in at the moment, but 12th I think seems about fair. In 11th, as we move into those teams that would hope to be in and around the playoffs, we've got Doncaster. A summer again of transition, a summer of upheaval. New manager in Darren Moore coming in to replace Grant McCann, who's gone to Hull. At this moment in time, obviously, you'd expect them to do a bit more business, but they've hardly done any. And they've lost the likes of Butler. Morosi's gone, of course, who was a very good goalkeeper. Danny Andrews, a big loss as well. I was very impressed with his performances last season. And I think
I'd still be surprised to see them hold on to Marquis.
Well, exactly. Will they keep Marquez? I don't know. Obviously, that's another question that needs to be answered. I think the club don't need to sell him, so they're not looking to. They've still got James Coppinger in there. Alfie Crawford is a very good player.
Coppinger's obviously a legend of the club, but he's another year older, and I suppose we say this every season, and he keeps defying us. But there's Doncaster is a side that I think should always be looking for the playoffs, and there's nothing in there that says to me that they will be.
I think it'll be a step back this season.
Yeah.
They haven't got the same players. Some of their loan players have gone back as well, key players as well. So I think at this moment, and it's based obviously on the squad we're seeing right now. Ben Sheaf is a good player, by the way. That's a really good pickup. Reece James coming in, and Brad Halliday again, good signings. But I think they need a bit more depth and a bit more to convince me going forward that they're going to sort of keep the same momentum. And obviously, when they've got a new manager, will they keep that same mentality? Will they keep that same formation? I don't know how. It'd be interesting to see how Darren Moore does, because of course I think he was a bit unlucky to lose his job at West Brom, but clearly those in charge were not convinced long term by his ability. So it'll be a strange transition. I think he's a good player. He's a player in his time, obviously at Doncaster. So a season where no collapse for me seeing here, but I just think they'll take a little step back from where they were. And obviously there's a lot of good quality in this division for them to challenge. So 11th place it is for Doncaster. In 10th we have Burton Albion. It'll be a good season, I think, for Burton, because they've got Nigel Clough and a very good structured team. They've lost some key players. Obviously, Jamie Allen, I think, is a massive loss. And Marcus Harness, I mean, he's a player I hugely admired. I talked a lot about him last season, but he's gone to Portsmouth, I think, to facilitate the loss of Jamal Lowe, personally. But that's not obviously been confirmed. Carl McFadzean as well was one of the best centre-backs in the division. They have made some interesting signings. John Joe O'Toole comes in, and I'm not convinced by John Joe O'Toole as a League One midfielder.
I think it's quite intelligent for Burton. I think it just adds that little bit of extra strength that they perhaps lacked a little bit.
Yeah, quite possibly. Kieran O'Hara is an excellent goalkeeper who was brilliant for Macclesfield last season. So again, although they had the loanee chap who went back to Chelsea, they wanted him back, they didn't get him. But Kieran O'Hara is a more than capable replacement, I think.
Oh yeah.
Ryan Edwards, be interesting to see how he does. He struggled at Hearts last season. But a good player when he gets given a run. So I think they've got a solid squad. I think they've got an excellent manager. And I think Burton will have a strong campaign, but will probably finish safely in mid-table, but not trouble the playoffs too much. In 9th, Chris, who have we got in 9th?
Blackpool. And this is another team that we've spoken about a lot, about really admiring. They've been to hell and back through the last few years with their ownership. And they're finally past that. Grayson, I think, is the perfect manager to lead them now. Although I think he was Preston manager for a little while, so that might be a little bit contentious.
He did very well at Preston. So
I think
if he comes in and does well, they'll forgive him.
Oh yeah, as I say, I like Grayson. They've not really lost anyone that I thought was really good for them last season. I think they've brought in a good keeper in Jack Alnick from Rangers on loan. Ryan Edwards, I think, is a smart addition. And I think the big exciting signing for them is Jamie Devitt. And I think 9th is probably about right, but I can see them making a serious push for the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, if they obviously they keep Curtis Tilt, that'll be massive for them, because Ryan Edwards, Curtis Tilt is a formidable League One centre-back pairing. Jamie Devitt, hugely exciting signing. If he plays, he's at his peak. I think he's at the best I've ever seen him play. And if he can continue the consistent level of performance he did at Carlisle last season, then they've got someone who can create a lot of chances. And he's obviously a superb player. Sully Kaikai, I mean, this guy had a lot of potential when he left Crystal Palace. I think it'd be interesting if Grayson can get that out of him. They've got another exciting attacking player there. James Husband, I think, comes in perhaps to facilitate the move of Mark Bowler elsewhere. But James Husband, obviously, a more than capable fullback. And I think Ryan Hardy, highly thought of midfielder. They've signed him on a permanent deal. There's some good recruitment been done. Whether or not they have enough to beat the sides that we've got above them to a playoff spot, I don't know, but they're certainly one to keep an eye on. Could be a bit of a dark horse. In 8th, we have the Millers, Rotherham. This was a very difficult one to choose because we like Rotherham, we like their manager, we like the squad they've got. We're just not convinced there's quite enough in there at the moment to fire them into the playoffs. I think
I agree.
Coming down, they've lost some key players as well, haven't they? Let's be honest. Joe Newell, Volks has gone, Sami Ajay's gone. So it is going to be a season where they have to in essence rebuild. Ryan Williams left as well. So some of those players that they had that fired them to promotion via the playoffs 2 seasons ago are not going to be there. But they have recruited well. We like Daniel Everson. You love Daniel Everson.
I do love Daniel. He's a great goalkeeper.
Yeah, that penalty save you'll never forget it at Craven Cottage last season.
Oh my God.
But he's a great goalie, isn't he? He looks like he's got all the tools to go on and play in the Premier League. And he's sort of
and the way he improved through the last season. So he came in at the start. He was always a good shot stopper, but looked a little bit shaky, I think, with coming for corners. And he's worked with a couple of excellent goalkeeping coaches at Oldham last season, and I think he'll do wonders in League One. I think he's not far off playing in the top 2 divisions, so I think it's a really good acquisition for Rotherham.
Yeah, I think he's a perfect goalkeeper for them. Freddie Ladapo, if he can score the goals that he did last season at this level, then obviously
£500,000 though.
It's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. I think that's just football now. I think that's the problem. We're seeing silly money in football. I mean, £500,000, Plymouth will be laughing all the way to the bank. But then
he's had one good season.
Well, if he has a second good season, though, Rotherham will be the ones with the smile on their face. So it's a calculated risk, and obviously they've got that money to spend after seeing Will Volks go for £2.1 million to Cardiff. So it's not that risky in essence that they're not splashing money they can't afford to do it. Sean McDonald, would love to see him have a good run of form after an injury-plagued spell at Wigan, obviously at Swansea before that as well. Carlton Morris will work his socks off for you, and I think he'll be excellent. But I just think it'll be a season where they consolidate, they rebuild, they do flirt with the playoffs, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them actually in there. But we've got them currently in 8th place. In 7th, Chris, who we've got in 7th?
Well, this is another one which we debated long and hard over. We've gone for Fleetwood. I could very easily see them sneaking into the playoffs. I think one of the reasons we've not quite put them in there was around the question marks over the ongoing case involving Joey Barton, which perhaps unsettles the squad a little bit. But it does look like they're bringing in Peter Clark in defence, who was bizarrely released by Oldham. And I think that'll be good presence. I can see him actually being in the first team for them, but even if he's not, I think his presence around the club might balance out Joey Barton's more eccentric behaviours, let's say.
Yeah.
They've got a strong squad, I think. I think Rositter's a fabulous signing that they've got in on loan. I think that's from Rangers. He was at Bury last season and did well for them. Paul Coots is another great signing, and Josh Morris, I think, is another good signing for them as well. So they've developed their squad where they needed to develop. They impressed me last season, and I can see them having a strong season, perhaps just missing out because of a little bit of unsettle and perhaps sticks better teams.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it there. I think Jordan Rossiter is an excellent signing from Rangers. I think Danny Andrew will have a fabulous campaign with them. And I just think, Paddy Madden will score the goals. That will get them close. Obviously, Ched Evans not with them this season, so it'll be interesting to see.
I think they need another striker still.
Yeah, I agree. I think they do need one more forward player to sort of bang the goals in. Obviously, Alex Cairns is an excellent keeper. They've got a very good squad. Do they have enough to make the playoffs? For us, not quite, but obviously being predicted to come 7th means they're just outside. In 6th, we've gone, and this team I really think could do better than this, but Chris has talked me down slightly, but it is Coventry City. Obviously, all the problems off the field in Chris's thinking as to why they perhaps won't do better, but I love their recruitment. I think Fazdean is an excellent pickup at the back. I think Wesley Jobello, from what I've seen, is a very tricky, direct runner, powerful player. He should be very interesting. Jamie Allen is a championship quality midfielder coming in to a side that already has such a lot of good midfield players. Again, though, we were talking about this yesterday. Where are they going to get the goals from? That this team seriously lacked a clinical edge, and they haven't, I don't think, quite done anything to remedy that just yet. And that is why
we touched on this in January as well.
Higher. Yeah, exactly. They've obviously Connor Chaplin. They've got an undisclosed fee from Barnsley for him. I think a lot of their fans think that's a steal. But Jordan Willis is a loss, obviously. But they've got money to spend. I wouldn't be surprised to see them go in for a striker, either on loan or permanently, because that's where they need to improve. I think the goalkeeping problem's gone. Because as much as I like Burge, I think he was erratic. Mark Morosi will be a more stable pair of hands in net. But yeah, they create more chances than pretty much everyone in the division last season, apart from probably Barnsley, and yet they didn't score their goals. They underperformed XG really badly, and I think unless they remedy that, this team won't do it. Obviously you're talking about the fact they'll be playing St Andrews and all this stuff with Sisu. It's a real pain in the bum because this is a Coventry side that could go far. I think they'll do better. I think they'll do better than this because I think that Robbins is a manager who's very driven and he won't let any of the stuff off the field distract his playing side. I think he'll get them a bit higher than this. But at the moment, we have them finishing in the playoffs, so it could be a great campaign for Coventry City. And they finish just behind the team we have in 5th. And who's that, Chris?
It's the notorious Bottle Jobs. It's Peterborough United. They're another team that have got a superb squad. Darren Ferguson obviously has a great affiliation with the club, and he's done a good job with them beforehand. Although his contract extension last season was a little bit contentious, given they were slightly underperforming in the league. But I thought they were lacking in a couple of places last season, and they've addressed every single one of them. They brought Mark Beavers in, who is a fabulous defender. Christy Pym, who, that performance he had when we went to watch Oldham against Exeter at St James's Park, he was superb.
Well, he's the reason that in the first half, especially, that Oldham weren't 2 or 3 goals to the good.
Oh yeah, some of the, because you look at him and I think he's 5'10", I think, so he's quite short for a goalkeeper. Don't quote me on that. You can check that, but he's quite short for a goalkeeper. But his agility is next to none. Mo Issa, that's how they've managed to get him to the door. I'm unsure.
Well, it's a statement of intent, isn't it? Because they've broken their transfer record to get a player in who's had a slight risk around this because he had a great season at Cheltenham and then very frustrating time at Bristol City. Definitely, though, I think he's got a massive potential, and you're bringing him into a side that already has Ivan Toney and Matt Godden in it. So, that's a frightening attacking force at this level. Frankie Kent, who is one of the brightest young centre-back prospects from the division below last season, comes in. Dan Butler, really good left-back, probably the best left-sided player, other than maybe Danny Mayer, I suppose, last season in League Two. So a really good pickup as well. You've already touched on Beavers, who is, again, fantastic. George Boyd coming back. Interesting to see how he fits into their system and how many game minutes he gets, because of course he's not going to be the same player perhaps as he was before, but they've still got Marcus Maddison as well.
Yeah, but I still think George Boyd can do a job, because I think he can. Some of his performances aren't necessarily in his legs. It's his ability to pick a pass that's deeply impressive for me. So I think actually there is still a role for him, even if he's not the same player that he used to be.
Oh yeah, I think just his presence will lift the place as well. It's always good to have one of your sort of.
He's a club legend, really, isn't he?
Yeah, club legend coming back, and Dan Ferguson's been backed. He's been backed to produce the results, and finally, I think we will see Peterborough make the playoffs. If they don't, with the squad they've got, that's got to be seen as a massive failure, if I'm honest, because they've spent good money. They've signed excellent players. They've added to a squad that was very talented already. So anything other than playoffs for Peterborough, for my money, would be a massive failure. So at the moment we have them in 5th. In 4th, Chris, who do we have in 4th?
Recently relegated Ipswich, and they're a little bit of a tough one to judge. I think they've got a good squad. I think they've brought in a good goalkeeper in Balkowski. Apologies on the pronunciation.
Well, he was there last season, wasn't he? And they've kept him. I think.
Sorry. And I think he's a good goalkeeper. Luke Wolfenden's good at the back. But the big signing for them is James Norwood.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the primary reason that Tranmere got promoted last season. I believe he had the most goals in the top 4 divisions. I mean, there's not. He
doesn't need, does he? He doesn't need much of a sight of goal to score either. It's not like he's just a fox in the box. This guy scores half volleys. He scores goals from outside the area. He's so clinical, and if Ipswich can utilise him with the likes of Gian Edwards in support, and it depends what happens to Alan Judge. I mean, I expect him to go. I think it's unlikely he'll stay.
He wants to go, doesn't he?
Well, apparently, yeah. So that'd be a shame to see him go. But they do have Chambers at the back. They have obviously Luke Garber. I have to be honest, I'm not keen on him at all. I think he was poor. He was brought in as a left back for Oxford last season. He can't defend. He's got no pace, but he does have a good delivery. I'll give him that. He's got a good delivery. But my dad watched him with me down at Frank Park last year, and he was god awful. So
he was on a very modest wage at Everton, though.
Well, reportedly he's on 25k a week. I mean, whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But that's what I've heard, and I think if he is, that's just a sign of everything that's wrong with football. But it's the way it is, and you can't blame the player for that. But he's got to do more, I think, for Ipswich than he did for Oxford last season. And I think if they utilise him further up the pitch, then they may use him better, and they might get a lot more out of him. But as a left back, for me, he's not good enough. But the rest of their squad is good. The rest of their squad is solid. The rest of their squad is, you've got Danny Rowe in there. You've got Caden Jackson. Now, these players have done very well in League 2. They're definitely good enough to play in League 1. And overall, they've got a well-rounded squad and a manager who's been here before and done it before. So Thomas Holy is a very able backup in goal. Depends whether he plays him or Bukowski. But I think they've got 2 decent keepers, a very overall solid squad. So they could end up. We had them initially second, but we've sort of come down a bit. They've had some injury problems in the pre-season. Not quite as much depth as some of the other sides either.
And I think how they, assuming Judge does go, how they replace him, I think, will be critical.
It'll be very important, yeah. But I think 4th is a fair prediction for where we think Ipswich will finish. Right, in 3rd, a lot of fans are probably thinking, where's my team? They haven't been mentioned yet. Well, if you're a Lincoln fan, this is where we've got you. We've got you in 3rd. Not quite breaking the top 2, but I have to say, I think we've seen it with several sides in the past, having the right mentality at the club and a winning mentality can be such a big advantage, and that is what has been drilled into this Lincoln team. And what else has been drilled into them is the quality that they've brought in the transfer market so far. Very impressive. I mean, Joe Morrell, technically gifted. Jackie Payne, really good player.
What a signing.
What a signing, yeah. He was at an awful Bradford side last season and still was by far their best player. I think he scored 10 goals, double figures for assists as well. George Grant, just shocked that he hasn't been given more of a chance at championship level to prove himself. But certainly, if he is well coached, and he will be at Lincoln, he'll be a superb addition. Alex Bradley has looked good in pre-season and has impressed and brought in after a trial. Even admittedly, from Danny saying that he didn't really need to strengthen in that area, but he's done so well that he thought he deserves it. So they've got the same team apart from those additions that were there last season. Obviously, Matty Reid been sold to Billericay, and I have to say, if they've got a fee for him. I mean, Billericay, it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, they've signed Matt Reid and where's Thomas? I mean, crazy. But Lincoln have got a very good team. They've got players that know how to play at this level. They've got players that are experienced. They've got young, exuberant players. They've got players that can score goals.
There's a lot of parallels with Luton, I think.
Well, I think Danny was very cautious to remove those sort of statements because, of course, Luton's budget was greater and they had a bit more time to plan because they were in League Two a bit longer. But in terms of the mentality and the momentum that club has at the moment, I think it's not unrealistic to see them finish as high as third, and that is why we've picked them this high. If they make the playoffs, it'll be who'd back against them? I mean,
exactly. They've got, it's such an imposing place to go. They've got a great manager. They've got a great squad. It's all piecing together. I think they're slightly an off-field choice, I guess, for third place. We were saying when we were coming to our decision yesterday, but there's not a team in that league that I don't think they can beat.
No, exactly, and that's why we like the Imps, and we've got them in third place. Right, so the top two, perhaps not a huge surprise, but then I think if either of these sides that we've got in our top two don't finish in the top two, it can be considered a failed season.
Yeah.
In second, we have got the Black Cats. We've got Sunderland finishing second. Again, how can this? You look at the players that they've signed, and there will be more coming through the door. You look at the way that they played last season. You've got Jack Ross coming into a second campaign at the helm, and I think those who called for him to be sacked were wrong. I think if you don't give him a second season, then what's the point? What's the point? He's obviously going to have taken a lot of lessons from his first season in the EFL. League One is a very demanding and difficult division to get out of. He's brought in Conor McLaughlin, who I think solves their right back problem. I think they don't need a new goalkeeper, but Lee Burge obviously comes in as an able backup. Jordan Willis is an excellent defender, and Mark McNulty adds to the plethora of attacking options that they now have, with obviously Will Grigg in there and Charlie Wyke. So they've got such good options throughout the squad, and I haven't even mentioned obviously Dobson, who they signed from Walsall. I mean,
that's the big one. That's the big one for me. I was, as we discussed previously, in the week, I was a little bit cautious about Sunderland, and just the signings the past few days with Dobson, I think that takes him into the top two for me.
Well, they now have a midfield with an experienced player like Ledbetter, but he's got young, energetic, and dynamic players around him. I mean, someone said in Twitter, I don't want to see Luke O'Nien in midfield. Well, he's a great player. I'm sorry, I like Luke O'Nien. I think he did a tremendous job filling in at right back last season, but his best position is midfield. Wycombe fans will tell you how good he can be there. So having him as an option, you've got Lyndon Gooch, Aidan McGee, he's still there. I think they need more on the wings and maybe one more defender. But if this squad does not achieve promotion, then perhaps fans who want Jack Ross out have something to talk about and have something justifiably to underline their opinion.
Yeah.
But at the moment,
I don't think you can ignore the financial situation either up there. Of course, they had big issues falling out of the Premier League and then relegation again under their former owner. And last season was still unsettled on that matter. A lot of people go, well, Sunderland spent this amount of money. Will Grigg always comes up, but they were still very, very unsettled. And I think now that they've restructured things financially, they're trying to get these couple of investors in. I don't think that can be used as an excuse this season. And indeed, I think that will be the real turning point for them.
Yeah, I think they'll have a very strong campaign. We've currently got them going up automatically. In first place, therefore, that leaves Portsmouth. The reason I think Portsmouth will do well, despite the loss of Matt Clark, is the fact that they've recruited brilliantly. They've recruited sensibly, brilliantly, and they've brought in players to a squad that was already replete with talent. And they've got a manager who knows this division inside out. But for one blip, sort of middle campaign last year, they would have gone up automatically anyway.
Yeah.
I think Jamal Lowe is going to go, but personally, and this is just my personal opinion, but Marcus Harness is a better player. Jamal Lowe is fantastic pace, wonderful pace. He's got a lot of potential, but Marcus Harness is a technically better player in my opinion, and I think you'll get a lot out of him playing on that right-hand side. Imagine having Ollie Hawkins feeding players like Harness, feeding players like Pittman, Ellis Harrison in there as well. They've got all-rounded squad. Yes, they've lost Matt Clark, but they've signed Sean Raggett and Paul Downing, both massively impressive defenders. And I think those two could form an excellent partnership. Obviously, I think they need one more in because I wouldn't like to rely too much on Burgess. I've not been convinced by him. James Bolton, Energetic right back, knows this division really well. 2 excellent seasons with Shrewsbury. McCrory comes in, giving them options in midfield. Ryan Williams, haven't mentioned him, but I mean, what a player he is. He's a Championship player who's been playing in the Championship with Rotherham last season, was brilliant in the season prior to that at this level.
Yeah.
Where is the weakness in this squad? I don't see it as we stand.
Well, we said it so often last season that they basically had, especially when you look at their strike force, they've got 2 squads. And that 2 very strong squads, you could put out a different 11 every week, and I think they'd be difficult to find their match.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. And they look to be improving their infrastructure with in terms of their training facilities and that sort of thing. I think I could see them storming this league. I could see them going beyond winning it and absolutely storming it. Sunderland are the only ones that I think could come close.
Yeah, I think so. I think Portsmouth, therefore, are our justified pick to finish top of the league. Right, that is it. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please give it a retweet on Twitter and spread the word about what we're doing. We'll be back for our first podcast of the season, obviously, on the Sunday after the matches are played. Chris, you'll probably be joining me for that one, but thank you for joining me and giving your opinions on this one.
Yeah, great pleasure as always.
I hope you've enjoyed it, and enjoy the new season, everyone. Catch you later.